Um, so yes, you guys just missed that. Ryan believes a lower third, which is what this thing is on my that says Eklund and at Eklund below here, is not something to put your name on it, but is just in fact a euphemism for. Anyway, we'll leave it there. But the game behind me today, guys, for those because we're going through the history of video games, I want to see if anybody can name it from the chat room. So I'll tell you later. But this, I'll give you a hint. 1993 was the year this came out. And it's the only one of this. It's like a lot of these NHL video games where it belongs series of every year. This is the only time this game was produced. And 1993 is very interesting for a lot of reasons that you'll understand when I tell you the name of the game. You guys just missed Ryan. Now we can hear myself. That's it. Who's that?
We have an echo.
It's not something to put your name on it, but it's just in fact. Somebody has our podcast open in one of their windows. The game behind me, Ryan, you probably do. Going through the history of video games, I want to see if anybody.
Why don't you mute?
Okay, somebody stopped it. All right, we're done.
Okay. Got it. That was me. Sorry, guys.
No problem. Okay.
Novice.
All right, we're going to start the show. We will introduce in this order: Mike, Kevin, Ryan, Josh.
I'm going to write that down.
Mike, Kevin, Ryan, Josh.
Okay.
Mike, Kevin,
all right, here we go.
Ryan, Josh.
Mike, Kevin, Ryan, Josh.
Okay, I'm good.
All right, September, it's October
2nd.
Here we go. All right, here we go. Hey, Hockey World. It is October 2nd, 2014.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Kevin Allen.
I'm Ryan Garner.
I'm Josh Rimmer.
And you guys are good. And I'm Eklund. You're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. Today we get a chance to start for the and it's, by the way, it is Thursday. I usually say the day of the week in case you're curious. But today we're going to start our previews. We're going to get right into it because we have every year I do. I go through the last 4 or 5 years and try to see which divisions have been better. And this division has by far dominated. If you look at just records per teams over the last at least 5 years, the division we're going to do today, which is the Pacific Division. Once known as the Smythe Division. I'm trying to think of I don't know what we call this, the division. I'm trying to go back as far as we can on when the Kings came into the league. Well, they were in the Western Conference, right? So.
Well,
remember the old name for this division. Anyway, we don't have to worry. It was the West at one point. I think it's had a lot of different names.
Remember, in the 70s, the LA Kings were in the division with Montreal and Detroit and I think Pittsburgh, so they got moved around a little bit.
Right, so they've got moved around a lot. Then the LA Kings were in the Adams division for a while, right? Then was that the Adams division?
No, I think it was the Norris, but
the Norris division. Right?
It was the Patrick division.
The Patrick division.
I think.
All right, that's the Flyers were in the Patrick division. All right, anyway, here we go. So this is a good one. And for my money, the best division in hockey. Kevin, do you think this is the best division in hockey?
I don't know. It's hard to say that now, just because I think St. Louis improved. But yeah, I guess so. I mean, as I'm kind of going over my head, it is for sure. For sure, it is.
Yeah, I mean the Central is a great division, right? Yeah. And a lot of people think the Central. But I do think that if you're just to take flat out, in my opinion, teams that could win a Stanley Cup, you've got two. This may be the only division with two bona fide Stanley Cup champions, and this is the division where you actually are going to have, again, probably the best 2-3 matchup, maybe, out there. We saw last year with San Jose, LA, Ryan. So let's start with we're going to start with Anaheim real quick, and Anaheim they added this year. They added Kessler, they added Heatley, they added Clayton Stoner. So Mike Russo can no longer put out those tweets about Stoner not playing. And the key losses were Stoner and the other kid that he would always play. They lost Hiller, they lost Bonino, they lost Solani, Koivu, Perreault, and Winnick. They did lose a lot of players, but obviously the big pickup was Kessler. And I am not myself. I want to hear everybody's opinion on Ryan Kessler when we talk about this team, because this is this is a player that I think is either going to be an incredible success in Anaheim or going to be an incredible disaster in Anaheim. And I just have no idea which way it's going to go. Let's start with Kevin on Anaheim. What are your thoughts here?
No, I think Kessler will be a success there. I mean,
Okay.
It's just the obvious, and that is that when you're coming out with Ryan Getzlaf and Ryan Kessler as your top two centers, both of whom are big, brawny, go hard to the net, that's just a great start. Plus, they have a lot more depth, I think, than most people realize. There's a lot of secondary scoring on this team. I think their defense has gotten stronger. Cam Fowler gets better every year. He's moving closer to being sort of a Nick Lidstrom style of defenseman. And last year the fact he made the Olympic team, I think, was an acknowledgement of how far his game has come. But he's a puck possession guy that makes him strong defensively as well. If he's got the puck, the other team can't score. But he's also learned to play better one-on-one defense. Ben Lovejoy has found a home out there, and I think has been sort of an underrated defenseman for that team as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to like. I mean, the question we have obviously will be the goaltending, and I like Anderson and Gibson, but they don't have a track record the same as we've seen with other goalies in the league. We know what Quick's about. We know what Lundqvist's about. We think we know what Anderson and Gibson can do. Clearly Gibson is the best American goaltending prospect, and probably since Tom Barrasso. So there's a lot of potential there. But for a team that's this close to the Cup, probably they have a little bit of consternation about just how good their goaltending is, because it's a bit of a mystery.
And they were, Mike, I think I would safe to say that they are gearing up in everything they do to beat the LA Kings. That's what it feels like. That's it might. And they've gotten to that point where this is the team they know who they have to beat.
Yeah, I mean they're gearing up to match up with the LA Kings with their depth.
Right.
I think that was the main reason why they got Kessler, because now you can have Kessler and Getzlaf as a 1-2 punch up the middle. You have size, you have two-way ability. I'm a little not too skeptical. I think that there's enough left in the tank with Kessler that he can provide some secondary offense and take a little bit of the heat off of Getzlaf. But he was beaten up, and he has been beaten up over the years in Vancouver, and that is a little bit of a concern. What I do like about Anaheim is their young depth at forward. I like guys like Silverberg and Smith Pelly. Emerson Edom has got a lot of talent. I love
Emerson Edom. I think Emerson Edom is going to be a star in this league. I think he's way underrated, and only because of the depth has he not gotten more ice time. I mean, that's a team that's a player that I think that's why they could get rid of Bobby Ryan in my mind.
And they bring in, for all the criticisms that Ryan and I have made on Danny Heatley, he might fit in there as a role player. And I don't know if that means playing with Getzlaf and Perry or playing on a lower line, but having a player like that come into Anaheim is like similar to Dustin Penner coming into the LA Kings a few years ago. If he plays a limited role, he'll be effective.
Well, players are skilled players, right? I mean, that's the thing. Skilled player. He doesn't have a lot of speed. He's lost, but he's still. There's something about playing skilled players with other skilled players that matters. And Ryan, the one thing I want to say about this team real quick before we move on is I think that along with the Boston Bruins in the East, I think this is the best defense in the Western Conference. I think flat out, I think Stoner's a great pickup for them because he adds something. He adds some physical presence. They need that when they're going up against Kopitar, and they need that when they're going up against these guys. But Vatanen and Lindholm are two young defensemen that anybody in the NHL would want,
And unlike Los Angeles, it's not a really heavy defense. It's not a veteran defense, but it's very mobile. It kind of reminds me of a soccer team, actually, watching them sometimes, the way they're able to move the puck and use those defensemen working against each other rather than kind of the typical outlet pass, dump it in, chase it down. And so that they're able to create a lot of offense from the back end. I just think that helps their forwards a lot more than most teams.
Yeah. Here's a question though. One last question, Kevin, for you, Boudreau. I mean, is it looking at him, he's been a great coach in everywhere he's went, but obviously he hasn't won in the playoffs with two really good teams in different places. Do you think if he doesn't win the playoffs, he could be in trouble here?
That's a great question. He's always been a player's coach. I know Teemu Selanne obviously had trouble with him, and really it was about his personal circumstances. But most players who play for Boudreau want to be successful for him. I guess the question people have had is his game modern enough, sophisticated enough for the changes that have really sort of basic coaching has changed over the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
Is he, current? I think he is. I think he's a really good coach, and I just wanted to go back, if I could, a little bit about the defense. The one thing about that young defense that you have to be cautious about is I saw them play a lot last season, and I really felt that Boudreau did a good job of sort of, I don't want to say he hid Lindholm, but he was very situational in how he played him, and I think now, this season, he's going to have to, he'll have to play against the top players more often, and he'll have to move on. So I don't think they're the best defense in the West. I love St. Louis's defense. I think it's with Boomeister and Shattenkirk and Pietrangelo and Barrett Jackman, and that's a pretty good group. But I do think Anaheim's defense is pretty good. But as the case with all coaches, going back to Boudreau, if they got knocked out in the first round, certainly he's vulnerable.
And I don't even think they're the best defense in the division. I think LA's is better. But Josh, you had something to say.
Yeah. Speaking of defense, there's still, at least I haven't heard anything. I'd like to know what's going on with Sheldon Surrey. He's still under contract, is he not?
Yeah, another year. But supposedly it's an arthritic wrist, and I haven't heard anything about him even playing, let alone whether So that's a big question mark.
I think I don't think we'll see him back. It's a shame because I do like Sheldon Surrey in the league. He's a fun player to watch for sure. Then moving on to a team I know, Kevin, you've always had a soft spot for, the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
Coyotes. The Arizona Coyotes.
Yeah, Arizona.
Yeah,
I do. I've always tried to keep that team in the desert.
Right.
I've kind of believed that if they had stable ownership, they actually could have been okay. I encourage all fans who enjoy going to different arenas to schedule a trip to go watch the Coyotes play out in Glendale, because it's a great arena and it's a good experience. It's there's a shopping mall, as everyone now knows, right next to it, and hotels, literally a 40-yard walk from the arena. It's really convenient once you get there. I guess that's the key. If you're living there, it's not strategically located. But I'm a little concerned about the Coyotes taking a dip this season. I think they got away from Dave Tippett style hockey last season. They were uncharacteristically sloppy defensively, particularly late in the season when they were fighting for a playoff spot. So I think there's going to be a sort of a recalibration on the way they play. Like I think you're going to see them play much more like they did 2 seasons ago and less like they did last season. And I think that's as a direct result of them realizing again, or just remembering that they can't win by trying to outscore the opposition.
Right.
Their best 2 offensive players are still defensemen.
Right. And they lost 2 of their better scorers in Rivera and Verbata.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And with Yandel and Ekman Larson trying to lead the way, and they're going to be counting on Sam Gagner now, and he's obviously not a premium scorer. And Shane Doan, of course, is not getting any younger. It's going to be interesting to see if Max Domi can step in, and I think they're expecting him to contribute this season at some point. But there's a team I think that is vulnerable to maybe slipping a little bit, but I think in the long run they're going to be great. Like Henrik Sandelson, he was really good in training camp. He's obviously been sent down now, but in the future I think he's going to be a valuable asset as well. So I'm still bullish on that team. I think Don Maloney is a very capable general manager, and I'd like to see what he could do with a full budget, because he's really been designing on a dime now for such a long time, and actually keeps that team quite competitive. And you can imagine if he could go to the cap, what he could do.
Oh, I know. Wouldn't that be something? I would love to see that. And Gagner, Ryan, you're very familiar with him.
Mm-hmm.
what do you think? I mean, obviously when we think of Gagne, we think of a couple different. We think of the guy who's sort of at one point he was the future of the Edmonton Oilers, right? Before all these other guys came in, and he was in that. He was the future before this future. He was them. And then, of course, he's had his moments too, where he's put together these crazy point games, where he where he had this, his nutty streaky type scoring stuff. If he played against the Chicago Blackhawks all the time, he would be a 400-point scorer. But yeah. So, what are your thoughts, Ryan, on him?
Everyone thinks of his 8-point game against Chicago a couple of years ago, and that was his big highlight. And it's unfortunate the way he left Edmonton, because last season he got off to a rough start with the broken jaw suffered in the preseason. Yeah. Never got on track, never adjusted to Dallas Eakins' system, never was able to kind of fit in there and become a productive player and show a commitment to a two-way game, because that hadn't really been emphasized in Edmonton before. And so he didn't leave town on the best terms. I think there's a lot more to his game than I think he's shown to this point. I think he can get back to the point levels we saw from him in his first couple seasons in the league. And he'll be given a chance in Arizona. I mean, the problem, though, is you're facing some premier centermen in the face-off dot and defensive two-way players, whether it's San Jose, Los Angeles, Anaheim, Vancouver, every night. And so whether Gagne can be the guy to stand up to that kind of attention, I don't think he's a number one. I don't think he's proven he can handle that job. But it'll be interesting to see what the Coyotes can do with him.
Yeah, that's the one I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to move ahead to Calgary because we don't have a whole lot of time, and I want to make sure we get everybody in here. There's a lot of teams to talk about. So I'm going to skip you on Arizona if that's okay with you, Mike and Josh. But yeah, so in Calgary, okay, Calgary adds Jonas Hiller, adds Mason Raymond, Derek Engeland, and Devin Setaguchi. So that's a little bit of an island of misfit toys type additions. So when you look at that list, all players who have had their moments when they've been very impressive, and all the players, Engeland, signed for a lot more than people expected there for sure, but and they lost Camilleri, who they've lost. It seems like hasn't he been there 4 or 5 times now? So, and back, Kevin, what do you think? What are your thoughts on Calgary?
Well, I mean, Calgary's treading water a little bit right now. They're a bit of a patchwork. They were actually quite competitive at the end of the season, and I think that's really sort of a tribute to Bob Hartley, who kept it, competitive. And they didn't move forward this offseason. I think they still see themselves in a rebuilding mode, and if you're doing that the right way, you change a few players at a time, and I think that's what they're attempting to do. I think they've stabilized their goaltending with Hiller, which I think is important. But they're a very average scoring team at this point, and it's going to be interesting to see if Bennett, their fine young high draft pick, can come in and be successful. Obviously, they've want to give him the opportunity early on, but I don't see that they've done enough to advance beyond where they were last season.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you, Mike. Mike.
Yeah, as typical of a club associated with Brian Burke, they're not good enough to make the playoffs, but they're good enough to stay out of a premium draft pick. I mean, I like some of the additions. I mean, I think they've drafted very well. Monahan had a really good rookie year. I think Bennett, if he makes it this year.
That's fighting words, Mike. I don't know. We got to bring Berkey on to have you talk to him.
I think Johnny Gaudreau is an exciting player, and I'm anxious to see what he does in his first NHL season. And I think they have a couple good young defensemen. TJ Brody I like. Giordano's not exactly young, but he's in his prime, and I think he's a pretty solid defenseman. And they have some decent forwards, and Hiller will win them games. But I think it would behoove this team to, with the bevy of top prospects in this draft, Hannafin and McDavid and Eichel, that they get one of those guys, and that would be an addition to that core. But yeah. I think they're going to be just outside that group because of the quality that they have. So
right. You sort of have a different opinion on the Calgary Flames than most people, because I remember you saying this before, that where a lot of us, I also believe, like Kevin, when I watched them, at least when I saw them, they were very competitive, and they were tough to play against. But you said that you didn't think that was always the case.
Yeah, I mean, they have a reputation of a team that kind of grinds you down and shows a commitment to work ethic and approaches games, kind of with a chip on their shoulder, looking to knock teams off. And that's commendable, but the problem is they just don't have anyone who can score. They don't have anyone who scored a career high, I think, is 25 goals on that team, and that's just not going to cut it. Especially when you're looking for go-to players and there's such a premium placed on power plays and making sure you cash in on them in the regular season. I just don't see how that team is going to be able to compete and keep up as far as goals are concerned.
Come on, Ryan. Matt Stajan is an offensive force.
Yeah. Or, Yuri Hudler. I mean, we're talking again about misfit toys here, and they're all, quality players. But whenever you hear, I heard the other day somebody talking about Calgary on the radio and on XM, and they were saying that Calgary is going to score by committee. That always frightens me. I don't think you can win in the NHL by scoring by committee. I really don't think that works. I don't think you're going to get goals. They can't expect Camilleri's goals to be replaced by Raymond instead of Gucci. It's just, I don't, and Hudler and maybe, I don't see that. So
the phrase bullpen by committee in Major League Baseball.
Right, it's the same kind of thing. By committee,
you don't have a closer. That's what it means.
A lot of mediocre players, and they're going to play. That you're hoping by putting all those mediocre players on the ice, they're going to equal one half-decent player, and I don't see that's going to be the case. And then these aren't bad players, and that's a little unfair, but that's sort of what I think of when I think of committee. Edmonton, we move to next. Ryan, so start us off. I want to say this before. I watched a little bit of last night's game, and they were impressive last night.
They won last night.
They won, and Benoit Pouliot really looks good as an Edmonton Oiler, and I'm not a huge Pouliot fan. I mean, he was good for the Rangers last year. He took a ton of dumb penalties in the offensive zone during the playoffs too, though. There was different times, and Teddy Purcell I've always liked. So there's certain guys that they added, and Draisaitl looks like he could be sticking around. That's kind of surprising to me as well. So what are your thoughts, Ryan, going in this year?
Going into this year, at least the Oilers have started to figure out their identity in the case that they know what they have, and they know now they're looking for complementary players who can kind of accentuate the core of Hall, Nugent Hopkins, and Eberle, whereas in the past you had guys like Horkoff, Hemsky, Ryan Smith, guys who'd been first-line players in the past who didn't really know how to adjust to a second- or third-line role. Bringing in guys like David Perron, Pouliot, Purcell, these are guys who have never been first-line players, never expected to carry the mail offensively, and so they're able to settle in more, I think. They bring in Draisaitl, the rookie. It looks like he's going to be the second-line center. The coaching staff has given him a lot of confidence, showcased him in the preseason, and he's rewarded them with a strong effort. We'll see how it translates to the regular season, but as far as the forwards are concerned, it looks like the best group Edmonton's had since their 06 Cup run, quite frankly.
They're a great forward group, but is there any concern, Kevin, I want you to address this, on the fact that they keep bringing these guys up right away? And Draisaitl seems, I'm worried about this. The same thing, Draisaitl seems like another case of that. I don't know. Kevin, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it hasn't worked in the past is because they were, bringing in young guys to play with young guys. And now Taylor Hall's been around a while. So you're bringing him in and you're fitting him in with a group now that's a little bit more established. So I think that's a little bit different. I think the Oilers are an improved team, and usually we look at the Oilers and we go, you just shake your head about they're so far away. But their goaltending, I'm not excited about their goaltending, but I think it's stable, and I think it has some promise. And the same thing, I feel the same way about their defense. The only problem with the Oilers is they could be 20 points better this season and still not be close to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so unforgiving in the Western Conference, and I think they could be 20 points better. I really do. I mean, there's a real sense that they've sort of figured it out a little bit now, and I think there's a lot more confidence. And the assessment that they've picked the right guys, I think is right on the money, because I think they are now sort of just adding pieces as opposed to throwing darts, which I felt like they were doing up until this season. So
yeah, I'm with you on that, and I think another thing that I've felt like is if you have something that's broken, and the scientific way to approach it from an engineering perspective is to change one thing at a time to see if it's working. To see what it really. And they've always to me changed 3 things at a time, and it's hard to tell what has worked and what hasn't worked, and what's fixing and what's not fixing. This looks maybe like the first year that they're not doing that. That's good. I think that's a good thing. And I think they added some character players, which they needed. They needed third-line players, in my mind, that had some character to them. Like Purcell is going to be good in that. Priot's going to be great in that role. They need that. Mike, Dallas Eakins, thoughts?
I mean, I like Dallas Eakins as a coach. I know that Ryan disagrees. I think he's a fine coach. I think he has a good defensive mindset. He always worked well with kids and with the Toronto Marlies, but this is the NHL. I mean, one thing I do agree with that is your assessment that there is a little bit of like an 80s Toronto Maple Leafs feel with this team because, that team, they drafted an 18-year-old kid in Jim Benning or Vincent Domfus or Wendell Clark or Al Iafredi, and they were right in the NHL right away. And sometimes I don't think that benefits these players. Now, they have a lot of talent, and I think, Draisaitl is not being dependent on as a number one center, so, that sort of mitigates that concern. But I don't know the long-term benefit of guys like Yakupov and Draisaitl getting in the league right away. To me, the key to this team is the goaltending. If they get solid play out of Fast and Scrivens, and the defense, which I've been a critic of for a long time, I still think Nikita Nikitin was way overpaid. I think he's an okay 3-4 defenseman, but right now he's being paid like a number one. Justin Schultz could be the worst defensive defenseman in the NHL.
I'll buy and second that. Yeah, I do agree with that.
But you do have guys like Fane and Ferentz who are veteran players who should stabilize things. But I think they need eventually to move one of those young forwards and get themselves a 25 to 30-minute defenseman. That's the only way this team ever makes the playoffs. And right now they're not. I don't think they're close to being a playoff team.
No, they might be close, but what's that sound? Anybody have that sound? You guys hearing that?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sounds like, yeah.
It's gone.
Sounds like an airplane bathroom. But anyway.
That's fine. Hopefully it'll disappear shortly. Let's move on to the LA Kings. Obviously Stanley Cup champions, according to EA Sports, will win their third Stanley Cup this year in 4 years. They lost Willie Mitchell, and Willie Mitchell is a big loss. In my mind, he was a great pickup by Florida. He's the perfect pickup for them. But he's also a pretty big loss. What's funny? I talked to our Matt Barry, who I really trust on the Kings, and he's been covering the Kings for a while and stuff like that. And he claims to me the other night, he texted me at 3 in the morning because he's in LA, of course, and says to me the Kings are not making the playoffs this year. I'm telling you that right now. They're not making the playoffs. No way, shape, or how. This is not a playoff team.
Yeah, can I get my $50 back from the fantasy pool that he told me that I was guaranteed to win because I had all San Jose players when they were up 3-0 on LA? I mean, come on.
Starting to think that Matt's way of doing things is by picking against his team and hoping it works the other way. But I don't know who that sound is, guys. Let's all mute everybody real quick and just I'm going to mute each of you real fast. I'm going to mute Ryan. It went away. I think it was on your end, Ryan. So you can unmute yourself. It's something to do with you if you want to log in, log out, and come back in or something like that. You can do that too. All right, so the Kings. Kevin, are they a playoff team?
Yeah, I think they actually may win the division.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a step if you're looking for small challenges, how about that? How about just coming out and winning your division? And I think they may do that now. Like Gaborik really changed that team. Like I don't think we paid enough homage.
Yeah.
Like we talk about missing pieces all the time, but in this case, that's one that really just completed a very good team. They now have a dynamic offensive threat that they've been lacking, and when you look at the center ice they can throw out there now with Kopitar and Carter and Jarrett Stahl and Mike Richards, and then the firepower like Dustin Brown, they hope he's going to score, come and be the scorer that he was a few years ago, but they don't need him to do that. It would be nice if he could, but they don't really need him to do that because they really do have a lot there. This is a very strong team, and Toffoli's going to be better. Tanner Pearson's going to be better. I had the opportunity to take part as one of the panelists in a presentation for NHL rookies this season, just talking about the media. And I looked out, and Tanner Pearson was among the rookies who was getting this, and I'm thinking, wow, this guy's already been through a Stanley Cup and won a championship, and now they're teaching him how to deal with the media. Like, he had a pretty good run at it, last spring. So, this is just a great team, and Dean Lombardi has done a remarkable job of kind of holding it together. Everybody took a little less money. Like Green, who re-signed there, on the open market, he would have gotten $1 million more per season. There's no doubt about it. Gabrick could have done better. I mean, he hit a big home run getting a long-term deal, but he could have done better on the open market. There's no doubt about it. And Mitchell was a very valuable defenseman, but they're deep enough on defense that I don't think they'll miss him. I really don't. I mean, to me, it was either Green or him. Green came in cheaper, so that was a good move. And and the other thing is, I think Drew Doughty is going to get even better. I think he'll win the Norris Trophy this season. I really do. And he's a 3-zone defenseman. There aren't as many of those guys around. So I think this is a very complete team, and I think it's going to be them right again in Chicago in the West.
It's funny because were they in the East and they didn't have to focus on the regular season, you would sit there and say, well, they could get lazy because they turned into such a playoff team. But they're not. They have to focus on the regular season because they can't just be a playoff team because they won't make the playoffs. It's the reality. This is a tough. So I think that you're not going to see them get lazy. You get the feeling that this could be like Sutter's last hurrah. I don't know why. I just kind of feel like he could win a Stanley Cup and then ride into the sunset somewhere in Red Deer.
Yeah. I mean, I never feel like he loves being he certainly doesn't love the spotlight. We know that.
Yeah.
And players are always amused at his dealings with us in the media. But you always have the feeling that this could always be not only his last season, but maybe his last game.
Yeah, right, exactly. At any minute, he could or last press conference, he could just say, that's it, I'm done.
Yeah, and riding off into the sunset, I think, would be an apt description of what he would do. He'd just head off to the farm. He'd head off to the farm and paint his barn. That's what he'd do. So.
I want to go to Josh too, but first I want to. There is no coach in the league who better defines something that I hate being defined. Okay, I hate when players say that coaches, they don't trust coaches who didn't play the game. I'm like Ken Hitchcock or Scotty Bowman is obviously always brought up, but because I think Ken Hitchcock's an amazing coach and Bowman was obviously, and you don't have to play the game to be a great NHL coach or play the game at an NHL level. They all played the game, of course. But when you're around Sutter, you kind of feel like maybe you do have to be a coach to play. You did have to play the game because the way his players react to him is as if he's still playing the game. And I feel that's how I feel. Josh, your thoughts?
Well, I just wanted to bring up about what Mike Richards has done in the off season. Everything I've read, he's dedicated himself to fitness in the off season. He worked with a personal trainer. He worked with the training staff in LA. He made it his mission basically in the off season to come back as a better player, that great two-way hockey player he used to be, and kind of fell off the rails a little bit. All the rumors and speculation about the LA Kings possibly trying to trade him, or there was rumored buyouts, him playing on the third line. He really wanted to come back this year and prove to the Kings that he's still that two-way player and can help the Kings, in possibly winning a third Stanley Cup here. And I really like what Richards has done here in the offseason, and I've pegged him to actually have a really good year and maybe one of his first good years in a long time.
As long as he's healthy, and that's you never know with him if he's healthy or not. That's the thing. He'll play through anything. You just don't know. But this is a big year for them, Brian, because when you think about the whole thing, I don't know if they can keep the Beatles together after this year. They've got Kopitar next year, and they've got other players coming up, and you're gonna have Justin Williams. He's such a big player for them, but he's going to be a UFA. I don't know if they can keep them together after this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's what success brings, right? We saw that with Chicago. We've seen that with Boston to an extent. It's hard to keep the band together once you get egos in the room and once you get people buying into the hype. And that's why I think Sutter's done such a good job there, is because he just imposes that mindset like, hey, we're doing our thing with or without you, whatever. I heard a great quote from him earlier this week where someone was asking him about a team bonding trip. And he said, if you need to go somewhere else to find out the personality of your team, sounds like you have a disorder to me, right? And like that's just kind of, you go to work, you put on your boots, and you shovel the crap, right? Like that's kind of how he approaches it. And so whoever comes in there, they know you have to adjust to the room. The room isn't going to adjust to you. And so I think that's what makes Los Angeles successful, regardless of who they lose in the offseason here coming up. But hey, they're going to have another great run at it this season.
Now, do you guys think that there's a chance that maybe Dean Lombardi could kind of take a page out of Ken Holland's book and what he was able to do by getting Red Wings players to kind of take a little bit less, take that hometown discount?
I don't think so, because the reason I don't think so is because they actually have players coming up, like, you know, Tifley and Pearson and these characters, that he doesn't have to do that. You know, he doesn't have to do that, and I don't even think you really want. At some point, Justin Williams, you have to let him go. Like he's as great as he's been. You have to let Tifley play. You know, I mean, this kid. You know that. No, Kevin, you disagree?
No, I completely disagree. I think he's already done that. I mean,
okay.
If you look at the salaries on these players; they're all lower than what you would expect.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, almost all of them. You know, Dustin Brown's money is reasonable. Kopitar's money was reasonable last time around. He's done a real good recruiting job out there of selling the players on the idea of, hey, let's keep the band together. Now it's difficult, and I agree with you. Moving forward, it'll get harder. But I think he will try to convince people to stay, and I do think that, you know, he's a smart guy, and just as you pointed out, you know, you have to make room. I think that's part of the strategy of winning. You have to bring in and introduce new players in it, because I think you also have to keep the hunger strong. You need new guys in the mix.
And what I think will happen, Eck, is that he'll be strategic. I mean, you got guys like Jared Stoll and Robin Regehr. I mean, Robin Regehr especially is, I think, on the tail end of his career. He's making $3 million. Jared Stoll's making over $3 million. Kopitar is up as an unrestricted free agent at the end of next year. He's going to have to start making probably, I'd say, over $8.5 million. I think he deserves that much as the type of center he is. Yeah. And you know, and you have to pay
less. There's no question that if Kopitar stays in LA, he's going to be taking a discount. I think that's because I don't know. I just feel like that somebody would give him more than LA is going to give him.
I think he'll stay, and I think he'll get a good, you know, good salary. But you know, I think they'll make room for that. I mean, the cap's going to grow by $5 million next year, probably. You know, we're just guessing, but
yeah.
You know, there's room for them to re-sign Kopitar and Williams, I think. Now, you know, then they'll have to make some other hard decisions. But I agree. The people that'll be moving out are the older guys that you know, the Regehrs and but I think they'll keep Williams and Kopitar.
Yeah, I mean, it was close apparently on Richards, you know. So I mean, Richard, well, he also gets a breakout, and I think my breakout player for the year, like you have Nikushkin as the guy who's going to improve the most point-wise. I think Jeff Carter is going to be that guy this year, and I think that he's going to be a monster. He already has put up great numbers, but something about him last year in the playoffs, you could see. I've seen a lot of Jeff Carter since he came into the league, and there's two Jeff Carters. There was always the Jeff Carter that played like kind of like Matt Sundin did when he was really good and would drive to the net and would make great plays, and there was the Jeff Carter that played like Joe Thornton, who was a perimeter player and keeping me on the outside. And the Joe Thornton Jeff Carter I never was a really big fan of, and he sort of has gotten rid of that Jeff Carter and has learned to be this other player. And if he's that other player all the time, the guy could be a 50-goal scorer in the NHL. I mean, that's just, he's got crazy strength and speed, and he's cheap for the Kings. I mean, he's like because he signed that ridiculously long contract with the Flyers at like $5 million a year. So he could be a 50-goal scorer at $5 million a year. That's not bad. I mean, that's my thought on it at least. San Jose. Ryan, we're going to talk to you. You know, this is obviously there's so many ways you can go with this. They don't want to talk anymore. I heard a funny interview. You know, they're really getting frustrated about talking about how they got eliminated last year. They went to Tahoe. They had a team thing together. They weren't allowed to go to Vegas. There's all sorts of things. I don't know. What are so many stories about this team? Where are they, Ryan, in reality?
They are really the same place they were last season. Once you cut out all the captaincy nonsense and all the promises about doing things differently, they are the exact same team they were last offseason, right? The only difference is they have a little more question mark in net about who's going to be the starter, Stalock or Niemi. Rafi Torres is on the shelf for a couple months to start the season, and really, they know that they have a player in Thomas Hertl coming into training camp and coming into the start of the regular season. So those are the only real differences. When you look at the personnel, the mindset is still the same as it's been for the last 8 seasons in San Jose. This is the year we have to get over the hump. This is the year people expect us to do it. Nothing has changed in San Jose as far as that's concerned, and I don't think you're going to see any difference in the on-ice product than you've seen in the last 6, 7, 8 seasons from San Jose. Because, quite frankly, for as much pressure as there is now from the media and from the fan base, it's always been the same. It's always the expectation is always to win the Stanley Cup, regardless of what happened the previous season, and that hasn't changed at all.
Yeah, but I'm going to take the opposite side of this, and I'm going to see if Kevin and Mike can agree with me on this for a second, because this is my thought here. The Sharks have gone. Remember, the Bruins got eliminated by the Flyers, right? After the Flyers were down 3-0, and they came back, and the Bruins the next year came back and won the Stanley Cup. And at first, I was thinking that the Sharks weren't there, but I've talked to some people over there the last week or so, and I really do sense that there is sometimes maybe they could possibly be turning this into a real big positive for them. And this team has so much talent, and although Dan Boyle's loss is bigger than I think they're admitting. But beyond that, I think that this could be the year, like the one year, and I feel like I'm a sucker for falling down the path again. But I feel like
big time soccer.
Sucker, Mike.
Big time soccer. I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm done. I'm until until this organization significantly shifts their roster, shakes it up, they will not win. I am convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that the core of this team cannot win. They, last year was, I was sold. I thought, okay, everybody's underestimating them. They had a good regular season. They go in, they're up 3-0 against the Kings, and they folded.
But again,
I know the Kings were the Stanley Cup champions. Zach. I know, but when you have your foot on the neck of a team, you've got to kill them, and they didn't. And you have players who have never won, who are in leadership positions on that team. And I don't care if you strip the captaincy away from Joe Thornton. He's still a leader on that team if he's on that team. I don't care if you make Joe Pavelski the captain. Joe Thornton is a presence on that team. So
Mike, that's what they do. That's why I'm saying nothing has changed. People forget the years they were up 2-0 in a series against Detroit. They were up 2-0 in a series against Vancouver. Being up 3-0 doesn't make a whole lot of difference, and I don't see why anyone should say, I'm done with this team, they can't win now, when for years people have been saying, oh, any year now the Sharks can win. Nothing has changed.
So I'm losing hope. Kevin, help us.
Well, my first point would be having covered this league for a long time, I have just heard this about so many players through the years, and the best example is Steve Yzerman. Steve Yzerman in Detroit, you can't win. He's not the kind of guy that could lead them. I heard this throughout the late 1980s when they would get to the and then they thought about trading him, and then the fans changed, and guess what? He was a pretty good leader. I don't think any of this is Joe Thornton's fault. I really don't. I think the chemistry on that team, for whatever reason, just hasn't worked. But I think they're still a decent team, and I'm stunned that they didn't make more moves in the offseason. I would have done that. I think the mix they have there is clearly not right for the postseason. But I still think they're going to be pretty good during the regular season. And you get in the playoffs, who knows? You ride a hot goalie and anything else. They're in a bad spot. I've had this discussion with so many GMs around the league who would say, I wouldn't want to be GM of that team because you've got a good team, and it's not easy to strip it down and start over again.
No.
It's hard to identify what the problem is with that team.
When you look at how many NHL teams would trade their entire roster for the entire roster of the San Jose Sharks, and you probably have like 25 of them. I mean, has he done a bad job?
Yeah. Sorry. Normally I'm not a proponent for change's sake, but San Jose was a team this summer that cried out for change's sake, and they didn't do it. And I think they're going to rue the day. I think their defense is not as good as it was last year. They moved Brent Burns to replace Dan Boyle. They get rid of Brad Stewart. Their goaltending is questionable with Stalock and Niemi. Their forwards are very good. But I don't think they're as good this year because they replaced Brent Burns with John Scott.
Well,
so,
no, but
I mean, honestly, I think they're going to take a step back. They'll still make the playoffs, but I think their time has passed.
Well, what they should have done in my mind is gone after Ryan Miller. And I honestly think that, and people sit back and they say goalies and goalies and goalies, but no one seems to agree with me looking at the expressions of the panel. But I think they should have gone after Ryan Miller.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I do. I thought they should have. The best way to change the look of a team is to change the guy in net.
Yeah.
And I would have done that too. I said that before. The Ryan Miller made a lot of sense to me. Suddenly it seems like a completely different team if you put Ryan Miller in net. And the offense is pretty good. And then I would have made a move on defense as well.
Yeah, I would have made it, and it's just because it feels like a different team. Like a coach and a goalie have the biggest impact, in my opinion, in a locker room. Like they just flat out, and a goalie just changes everything, like you said. And Ryan can, and nothing against Niemi and Stalock because they've actually been very good, but they just haven't been. They haven't been something that
good enough. They haven't been good enough, and I think you're right. I think Ryan Miller, with the attitude he has, the personality he has, I think he would have been a great addition to that room as another voice of veteran leadership, as a guy who says, "Look, I've never been in a situation like this with a team like this where I have this kind of offensive support," right? So it would have been intriguing to watch, and I think, look, Stalock, Niemi, flip a coin on those two, right? But neither one is an elite goaltender.
Either could get hot, but let's move on to Vancouver, where Ryan Miller did actually go to finish off this division. They picked up Miller, they picked up Verbata. That's a risk. But because he's been pretty good at when he's been in Phoenix, but nowhere else. They picked up Bonino, which I like that move, and they picked up Lucas Biza, who continues, whose favorite song is Journey's "Don't Stop Believing." I know that because I interviewed him right after he got drafted. They lost Ryan Kessler. They lost Jason Garrison. They lost David Booth. They lost Mike Santorelli. I guess the question is how much last season was Tortorella's fault, right? That's what we're wanting to find out to see if this is Tortorella's team. Kevin, what are your thoughts on this team?
Well, I mean, it's hard to think of the Vancouver Canucks as a rebuilding team when they still have brothers, and they still have Bieksa, they've got Edler, they got Hamuse, it's still, and now they got Ryan Miller. There's a chance they could be pretty much what they were last season, other than I think they'll be in the hunt. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team, but just because the West is so strong, but it's still okay. This is a classic case, I think, of a team that's trying to rebuild on the fly, and that's always a little bit risky. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if you strip it down, it's a lot easier because then you bottom out, you get a good draft pick, and in this case, they could end up on the treadmill.
I agree that to me they're a team that's window is wide open, right? Their window was wide open for such a long time, and now they're just desperately trying to keep that window open. That's what it feels like.
No, I would agree, but the Tortorella issue was so huge that it really is difficult to know what happened to that team. But if you had to guess, you would guess that Tortorella, played a major role in what happened to that team last season.
Willie Desjardins, what are your thoughts on him, Kev?
Well, I like him a lot. Jim Nill, who I trust in terms of his ability to assess potential management and coaching people, told me that he thought he was going to be a great success. And most everyone I've talked to around the league has high praise for this guy as someone who can get a lot out of his players.
I like to see it. I like to see a guy like this get rewarded after such a long time, not as an NHL head coach. And I think that apparently from talking to people who've been around the training camp, it's been a night and day difference between last year and this year. So there's a lot of optimism going around. Mike?
Well, I was gonna say a night and day from the Mad Hatter and John Tortorella. I mean, it's somebody Mike Babcock could come in and he would be considered a player's coach after Tortorella. I mean, the thing that's a concern with the Canucks is, I mean, the Sedins are getting up there in age. They're starting to get a little brittle. You don't have the buffer zone of having Kessler as a second line. option for them. There's a lot of question. Alex Burrows had a really bad year last year. Alex Edler didn't really do that well. I mean, there's a possibility they could sneak into the playoffs. Miller would have to be, the way he was in Buffalo a few years ago, standing on his head. I'm just not convinced. They have a couple young kids, Bo Horvat, who might make the team, but this is an organization in rebuild mode, and they just don't know it. And I have a feeling by the middle or near the deadline, they're going to realize it, and there may be guys like Bieksa and Edler who get traded. So I'm not optimistic for the Canucks this year.
Yeah, I mean, as much as you can blame Tortorella, would they have finished in 5th place and just missed the playoffs with any coach last year? It feels like they would have. It feels like Kevin said, it feels like it could be the same kind of team.
Yeah.
Tortorella was definitely, a crazy. But let's get give us some quick news, Josh. We're running out of time. We're going to do predictions next week all together, I thought, Mike. Like, we will talk about the teams. We'll actually throw our predictions together right before the opening game on Wednesday. So I think that would be the fun day to do predictions. Maybe we'll have you back on Wednesday, Ryan. We'll have a full panel of just having a fun prediction show type thing.
Sounds good.
But Josh, so what's going on news-wise right at the hour?
Well, first of all, before we get to injuries, let's talk about what happened in Montreal. A little weird situation going on. The Canadiens had discussions with Drayson Bowman today. Bowman actually missing practice to have these discussions on a contract. Apparently, the discussions didn't go well, so what ends up happening is they release him from his PTO. See you later. That's kind of interesting. I guess maybe he was asking for a little bit too much money in that case. And Drayson Bowman, I mean, really, it must have gone really bad if they just said see you later after they had the contract discussions.
Wow. Well, Erik Karlsson was just named the Ottawa Senators captain, by the way.
Yeah.
I was
going to get to that.
I'm sorry, Josh. I don't mean to step on your parade. We just.
That's fine. I'm used to being stepped on. No, I'm just kidding.
Continue, Josh.
Yes, Bobby Ryan obviously signed a big deal today in Ottawa, keeping him in Ottawa.
Go Cherry Hill. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go. So that maybe will quell the rumors of him getting traded.
Nah.
Not at all. Continue.
Nope. Injuries. Kari Lettinen's good to go, according to Lindy Ruff. Sergei Gonchar is not and expected to be out for a period of time.
Shocking.
So that's a bit of a blow, even though he is up there in age. I don't know how bad. Bizarre injury.
Out for a fortnight. I'm trying to think of periods of time that were interesting. Let's call it a fortnight. He'll be out for a fortnight. That's a
bizarre injury in Calgary. Ladislav Smid, who's been out, had a tooth infection, and it cost him 4 teeth. But he is back in the lineup tonight.
Get back in there and play. It's only preseason. You just lost 4 teeth. Get back.
That's a hockey thing. But I've never heard of someone losing 4 teeth from an infection. That's kind of gross.
Floss, kids. That's all I can say. You got to floss. Remember to floss.
And one minor thing in Carolina, there's some cause for concern. Alexander Semin left practice early today in Carolina. There was no update on him. Not sure what happened, but he did not last the whole practice, and there was some cause for concern.
Boy, the Hurricanes can't afford that.
No.
That's a team that suddenly looks like a Connor McDavid team, and if these things keep going this way, I mean, everyone, I don't know, that's a crazy one.
I'd really like to find out about the Drayson Bowman thing. I think that's kind of humorous, but anyway.
Yeah, not for him, it isn't, but yeah. But yeah, that's all the time we have, guys. Thanks for joining us. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Tomorrow we'll be back we're going to be doing the Atlantic Division. Josh?
I got some breaking news here, courtesy of Bob McKenzie. The Phoenix Coyotes have returned Max Domi to the London Knights.
Wow.
Oh.
Well, that's the product of him being a 19-year-old player. He can't go to the American Hockey League. I don't think he has much left to learn with the London Knights. He's played 3 full seasons there, and he's played really well. I'm surprised they didn't keep him.
Me too. Yeah, I am too.
Really surprised, yeah, because this is where the rules should be changed. You play 3 years, you should be able to go to the AHL. That's ridiculous. But that won't be changing anytime soon. And thanks, Bob, for sending that in. Just kidding.
Yeah, he did give it to me.
I know.
I took it off his Twitter.
I know.
And I didn't steal it. I actually gave him credit.
You gave him credit, yes, for sure. All right, guys, remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey tomorrow, the Atlantic. The ever-fun Atlantic. See you then.
Bye now.